the more you do something, the more you get the opportunity to explore new concepts, the more you get to push yourself as an artist, the more experimental work you get to do. And I realized people really like the experimental stuff. So I just went even harder. And I guess the reason experimental stuff is very raw and expressive. And it almost kind of directly reflects what's going on in you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edit Undo podcast. It feels like it's been a while since we've chatted to you guys. Although we've been posting episodes quite frequently, it's been a while since we've recorded. So we might have a few kinks and chinks here and there, but we will do our best to make this an amazing episode. But I think because of our guest today, we're not going to have to try very hard because he has got an amazing story. We chatted a little bit briefly before this episode, and it was just it was eye-opening, I think, is the right word, the right way to put it. And for that reason, I'm not going to go into very much depth about introducing our guest. What I will say is that part of his journey, he was a mechanical engineer, and electronics and electrical engineering, I think is what it was. Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
But that's not what he does right now. And so I'm hoping that we can actually explore that story, hear a little bit about how an electronics and electrical engineer ends up where Anthony is. So, Anthony, welcome to the show, and it's really great to have you.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for having me. My name is Anthony Muisyo. I consider myself a multi-disciplinary designer, fashion designer, graphic designer, product designer, everything design. Yeah, I live and work in Nairobi. I'm a freelance designer. And yeah, I'm just so happy and excited to be here. Just talk about my story.
Amazing.
Nice.
So I think there's actually something that I wanted to point out before we dive into your story. That's just a little bit, well, interesting, for lack of a better word, because you sort of mentioned that you're a part of that multidisciplinary design is product design, and typically when I hear the term product design being mentioned today, that is more like designing apps and websites and tech. That's a product. When you describe it, like when you mention yourself as a product designer, is that what you mean, or do you mean like physical, tangible products?
I actually mean digital products. So
Okay.
part of my fiddling around, I write code. So I do the UI, the UX, and then I'm also kind of dabbling now in augmented reality, which feels very familiar to designing mobile apps. So product design in every sense of the word. Because I mean, when you look
Amazing.
at designing a garment, that could be considered a product. So yeah, a product designer in every sense of the word.
Amazing. Well, so I'm super keen to get into what that multidisciplinary form, the different forms of design are. But maybe before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about how you started off? What does the origin story of Anthony look like?
I mean, just like any other creative, it's been a very meandering path. One that's been a bit, full of unsure moments, but I trust in the process and where I am at right now. So this kind of kicked off when I was about 9 years old. Um, I used to sketch a lot in books. So I started by reproducing what I would see in my favorite storybooks. And then I think around when I was 13, I got into a little bit of comic design. Then that just kind of fell, by the wayside. Um, and then I got into college because now college kind of took up a lot of my time. So I kind of forgot about design for a minute. But that's when now I picked up programming. So I remember sometimes I used to skip class just to kind of get into YouTube and learn all this, about programming mobile applications at the time. So while I was doing these mobile applications, especially the user interface, it felt very familiar to me using Photoshop. So I was like, this is pretty much an extension of what I've been doing on Photoshop. So yeah, so I picked that skill up so I could get some extra cash on the side because, when you're in college, you're always looking for that extra buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that went well. And then I finished college with my new degree, brand spanking new. But then suddenly there were no jobs for electrical engineers in the market. It's this thing like, how the job market is kind of messed up, and high unemployment rates. So there wasn't that clear pipeline for at least 1.5 years. Then I eventually got a job at an engineering company, but down in Mombasa. So I live in Nairobi, and Mombasa is like at the Kenyan coast. So that's like 600 kilometers from the city.
Ew. Crazy.
Yes. So there I am, 22. I have to uproot my entire life, move on to a new city. I know no one there.
Wow.
And then I guess I turned to graphic design because it felt very comforting and it kind of reminded me of home. Because I just used to hold myself in the bedroom and then, churn out my little designs, my little artworks. Yeah, so when I was in Mombasa, it was a bit lonely. So I turned to making art as a way to kind of comfort me and remind me of home. And I don't know, I think that's actually one of the points where I feel like I made some of my best works. Yeah, so it was me 9 to 5. I have my electrical engineering job, but in the evening, I'd come home and then, knock out a piece or two, get a commission here and there. Hey, could you do us an album cover? Just such kind of stuff. And I would actually take the opportunity to work with my creative friends. So that's when I started getting to know more and more music producers and rappers, and because I love music, and the album cover art is a key component of my music listening experience. So I was like, whoa, so this is an opportunity for me to be one of those people who designs that. So I jumped at the opportunity and I just kept on collaborating with more rappers, more artists. Then came 2020. I don't know who was following me at the time, but I got an email from CNN. And this was during the lockdown. So they commissioned me to do a piece on the whole lockdown experience. So once I did that, I think that got me a lot more eyeballs, got me known more, and then I got more and more commissions. So it kind of felt like I was eventually easing into the art world, but I was not ready to accept that or admit that because I had this 9 to 5. So at the time, my mentality was it was one or the other. But yeah, so fast forward to 2022, actually 2021, end of 2021, I decided to quit my job and pursue this art thing full time. And yeah, here I am. So it's been about 1 year. Of doing this.
That's a very short journey to making that jump and actually pursuing it professionally. You said, oh yeah, you were doing a little bit of commissions on the side, and I was like, hold up. You said I was in a new city and you used art and as a form of comfort and expression just here on the side, while I'm doing this new full-time job that I just got. And then all of a sudden I have commissions that I'm doing. I feel like there's a gap there that we're missing. Or how did you get your work out there, or how did these people get to know about the stuff that you were doing in your room at home that was supposed to be comforting you with this new environment, and then you got commissions?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. So, right about when I was finishing campus, that's when I started to reconnect with this part of me that's making designs. So I'm doing this together with the mobile applications. But, you're done with campus, there's no job for at least 1 year. So what do you do with your spare time? So I decided to kind of just dive deep into making art and stuff. So that was in around 2017. So when I got the job the following year, I still didn't drop that. So I would post very consistently. I think
On
I was
social
almost doing
media?
it weekly. Yeah, on my Instagram.
Oh, okay.
I got to a point
Nice.
where I was doing it weekly because it felt intoxicating almost. I had to put stuff out. I had things to say. So I guess it's that doing that over and over again. And the more you do something, the more you get the opportunity to explore new concepts, the more you get to push yourself as an artist, the more experimental work you get to do. And
Yeah.
I realized people really like the experimental stuff. So I just went even harder. And I guess the reason experimental stuff is very raw and expressive. And it almost kind of directly reflects what's going on in you. And for sure, those are some of my, some of the pieces that people really, really enjoy. So actually, it's through that continuous posting and just kind of being relentless, and having this almost naive approach to, just put your work out there, just keep putting your work out there. And one day I just got an email. So, yeah, in this day and age of social media, people are watching. Anybody could be
Crazy.
watching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so true, and I think it's definitely for the aspiring artists or the people who are looking to leave something like a boring job to explore something creative. I think that's a really good piece of advice, like learning how to become consistent, learning how to put yourself out there, and I think especially putting yourself out there, because especially when it comes to creating something in some ways that represents you, it's always so difficult to put it out there because any criticism always feels a little bit of a criticism of you. And so it's always tough to do. And that's why in some sense it's so important to sort of build that habit of putting your work out there, and getting feedback from people. And then something that I am a little bit interested in is, for most people, you sort of start in a creative medium that's typically not where you end. So for me, I started off with pencil sketches. I hated painting. It was terrible. I hated all things color. I just wanted to use the good old graphite. That was sort of where I felt comfortable. And eventually it sort of transformed into illustration, in a digital format. And then that eventually evolved into, product design. Like what did your creative expression look like in the earliest years? Like as far back as you can remember? Like, did you start off with Photoshop? Was the first form of creating that you did? Or did it look like something else before that?
So my first encounter with digital art, as we now know it, was in high school. I was in boarding school, and I was in a boys' school. So we had this Kenyan boys. I don't know if this happens in South Africa, but Kenyan boarding high schools has this culture of sending love letters to, your sister schools in others, So, like, say in the school that I was, and my girlfriend is in whatever school, so you would mail them a letter. You'd sit down, write them a letter, draw nice, cute things on the envelope, and then send it over to them. So
with an actual postal service?
yeah. So
because that wouldn't work in South Africa.
Yeah, our postal system is terrible.
I know. It's honest, to date, it's still baffling that, the postal system was very effective at the time.
Wow.
So the school would collect all the letters on a weekly basis.
It's amazing.
And then they would post them for you for free. And then 2-3 weeks later, your girlfriend would get your letter. So it was a thing. It was a big thing. This mini industry. So I kind of saw an opportunity, and what I'd do is over the holidays, I'd get sheets of blank paper, and I would get on Microsoft Publisher at the time. So I still wasn't familiar with Photoshop. And I would go onto stock images websites and then download little cupids, with the love hearts and all that. And then I'd print them on the plain sheets of paper and on the envelopes. And so when I'd go to school, I would sell those. So yeah, like that, I think that was a huge catalyst, honestly, because that way you get direct feedback. Your homies come to you and they're like, yo, I fucking love this. Sorry, can I cuss?
Yeah, go for it.
But yeah, I'll just anyway. So yeah, you get direct feedback from your friends, and they're like, "Yo, we really love this. Like, you're actually talented." Because at the time, I thought I was just making a quick buck. But when people come back to you and they tell you, "Yo, this is quite something," so a part of me really stepped into that, and I guess that was now my fast encounter with that. Then shortly after high school, which is like a 4-year program, I started getting odd jobs. So in the CBD, Nairobi CBD, all these shops, they sell movies, they sell clothes. So I would do the little signages at the entrance. So whatever your name of your shop is, I would do a little graphic. Have you seen the ludicrous, the infamous ludicrous photo on him on all these barbershops? I'll share that.
Oh yes. When they've got those they have that board and it's got all the different haircuts that you can get.
Yeah, something similar, exactly. Yeah. So it was like this little economy that people who own shops would look for people who can do signages. So that was my first encounter with Photoshop. And then it kind of grew on from there. You start almost commercial, and then you get into more conceptual stuff as time goes by. So yeah, that was my first encounter with digital art, as we know it now. Yeah.
I find it so interesting, and I mentioned this to Alfie before. When I look at your work, you use a lot of real-time topics, very relevant pieces as well that can really resonate with a bunch of different people. And a lot of creatives who are in the career, a professional career as an artist, usually come from or at least the ones we know, Alfie and I in our circles and the ones we've spoken to, come from a background where they've actually studied or been educated in the art space. And what that also means is during that education in the creative career, they got to learn about the history of art and, the masters of art, which is usually a lot of first world influence. And you can also then see that in the work that they're producing today. Even though they might be local South African artists, you can see the influence from first world countries and art history as we speak. Then or at least for me, when I looked at your work, it's a little bit different in that way. And I was wondering if it's because of this journey that you've gone on, which is a lot more involved in your local community before you actually started producing pieces, as opposed to being influenced by the art that comes from Europe, the history and the stories behind those pieces.
That's a great question. So definitely, I think because I derive a lot of my inspiration directly from the streets. So whenever I'm driving around, I'm just always looking at the signages, just looking at how people live, how people move, and I try to bring that directly into my work. So I can say that this kind of non-linear path that I took helped me.
Yeah.
I don't want to say scat the traditional kind of model of studying art and everything, but I was able to leap. But one thing I also have to point out is I think it got to a point, this must have been 2018, 2019. I felt like there was a gap in me. Who were my art mentors, since I didn't study art. So that question kept coming back to me. Anthony, who are your art mentors? And I don't know, fortunately for me, I was really, really obsessed with Malik Sidibe. So there's this video by Janet Jackson featuring Q-Tip and Johnny Mitchell. It's called Got Till It's Gone. Beautiful, beautiful video. Of course, shot in America, but it reflects the apartheid struggle in South Africa, actually. You guys should check it out. And the entirety of that video just felt like flipping through an old family photo album, the suits, the dapper suits, the studio poses, going to the bar, photos of couples dancing in a bar. And I really, really love that depiction of, and how true to it they were, they weren't trying to depict anything else. It was that African experience. So I got into this deep dive and I started looking for these photographers who influenced the video director, and Malik Sidibe came up, the Seydou Keita came up, Depara from Congo, who ended up being Franco's photographer, came up, and I really started getting into their work.
Wow.
So I can say my training, quote unquote, is by observation of this old African masters. Because like you're saying, it's very Eurocentric sometimes. And then that also kind of guides your art direction a particular way. So I gravitated more towards the Malik Sidibes because I felt like they were doing something. I could feel their spirit. It felt very similar. Like they would take photos of people just around them, go to weddings, go to funerals, go to parties. And I don't know, it kind of feels the same process as mine. Just getting all this inspiration from people around me. So then later on, I started depicting my characters within studios. So there's a particular period, if you look at my work, I'm doing a lot more of putting people in studios. But my aim by putting them in studios is to just build worlds in there. Like the studio is this place where people came to find themselves because it was a post-colonial kind of movement and post-independence kind of movement. And, Africans are now free of this colonial BS. So it's like, who are we? So they would go to the studios and that's how they would answer that question. Who are we? So my work also kind of started taking that direction, where I take my characters and I try to also answer that question. Who is this? Who are they? So in as much as I didn't study, the long and short of it is that in as much as I didn't study art, I still had to take the time to find out who my mentors would be. Yeah, and I think I found some really incredible mentors in these guys.
Crazy. And I love that. And especially the words you just used, and it was so intentionally chosen. You went through the effort to go find who you want your mentors to be. Where I think a lot of us, and even me included, when I went through the educational path to actually study what I'm doing now, we obviously had a lot of mentors and inspirational figures in our industry that were given to us. And in some way, when you are served a bunch of really good creatives in your industry, sometimes you don't get curious to look past those because you just adopt those for yourself immediately, where it was just so beautiful to hear you say you went to go find those people for you, because that was a very intentional thing you did. And, you know, it's you could have picked anyone or any form or any direction, but you chose those ones because it resonated with you for a good reason.
Yep. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So,
I do feel like we are skipping one big thing, though. You know, when you introduced yourself, you were giving us this little timeline, and all in that timeline you mentioned the words, yeah, CNN reached out to me, and we kind of just blew that over. And it's a bit of a big deal. You mentioned CNN reached out to you. Can we just go back to that? Because it was so nonchalant, but...
I think it's because it was a couple of years back. But yeah, so COVID had just had everyone in this lockdown. If I remember correctly, this must have been June of 2020. Yeah, 2020. And everybody was so scared because you would see all these horror stories of, you know, bodies on the streets. Like nobody fully understood the magnitude of what COVID was. And then I think CNN were also kind of just trying to see how artists are dealing with this. And yeah, that's when I got that email from them, and they were just like, hi, we're going to be running an editorial piece on how artists are surviving during the COVID period. Do you mind doing a piece? Just, you know, they gave me free rein, which I really, really thoroughly enjoy when clients do that. Hint, hint. So yeah, there was
it
like
a big moment for you? That email?
Yeah, it was very humbling because here I am. I've just been making art in my room, you know, and this was also coinciding with the whole, just as an aside, coinciding with the whole bedroom producer phenomenon. I don't know if you guys know K. Tranada. I feel like he's a poster boy of that bedroom creative, one of those, you know, figures that represent that bedroom creative type of person. So just from seeing myself as this guy who's just behind a laptop in my room to actually getting an interview with CNN, that was very, very humbling and honestly very scary, especially when they asked me to produce something, because it's like, this is CNN, you have to outdo yourself. But thank God it went really well. And they also asked me to write like a blog post, so which I did as well, to just describe my thought process during the making of the artwork. But yeah, that's one of those highlight moments in my career, I must say.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So there's I'm actually, one of the things I'm super keen for in this conversation is to actually to dive into your work. You know, when we chatted about it initially, it got me very, very interested, because I think, and cards on the table here, don't judge me, but I've always been a little bit critical about people who do collages and mixed medium kind of art, because I always felt like there were a lot of people pretending to be artists and using collages to hide behind that. And then when I saw your work, it clicked for me about like what collages are actually about, and that sort of mixed medium type of art. So I'm really keen to dive into that. But maybe before we do, one of the things that I am interested in is how you actually got to that kind of style, because, you know, a lot of the art creatives in general, artists even, fine artists that I find these days, not a lot of them specialize in that type of art. And so how did you find this sort of medium of expression?
I think it was just a very natural progression from my
Cupid.
CBD signage, exactly, and the Cupid stuff. Because if cards on the table as well, I can't draw to save my life, guys. I just cannot fucking draw to save my
I love
life.
that though.
So whenever I was putting together those designs, if you guys have used Figma or Photoshop, it's a lot of just moving things from here to here to here to here. There's no line work that I had to learn. So I think it was like a new paradigm. It was like, okay, so I can still arrange my thoughts visually, even if I can't draw. I just have to go onto the internet and find this very specific pose of someone and bring it into my work. Yeah, so the collage style lends itself very well to just pick and place. Because even if think about it, when you're doing collage on a canvas or paper, it's more or less pick and place and arrange and just put things together coherently to tell your story. So yeah, that was just exactly what I was trying to achieve on Photoshop, and it felt very intuitive. So once it clicked for me, I was just like, okay, let's go all in. Let's figure this out. Let's see what exactly, how far can I push this? To what length can I go to with this collage thing? Because sometimes it's like, is it an illustration? Is it a collage artwork? Nobody knows. But yeah, the collage style really lends itself well to the pick and place kind of. I don't know if it's a technique. I don't know if that's the right art world term. But yeah, I like it, pick and place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I really, really gravitated towards.
Amazing.
You do make it seem very easy though, using those words pick and place. But then I look at your work and the color choice, the composition, all of that you can't do by just picking and placing. It's still that's still all in you, right?
Yeah, I think that also just comes intuitively because I realize my creative process is it's very spontaneous. I'm lucky that I don't have to mix colors beforehand so I can decide what this looks like. And that's also the beauty of collage sometimes. It's like whatever you get, work with it. However it comes, if the texture is not the specific one that you are looking for, that's fine. Just find a way of making it work. So yeah, it's pretty much creating within constraints that that makes it come out like that.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think I also spent a lot of time just staring at record sleeves of old African stuff.
Yeah.
I have so many Pinterest boards of just holding that visual inspiration. Yeah, so I think the more that I looked at it, the more it just became very intuitive. Yeah.
Crazy. And when you speak about your creative process, do you start by choosing a subject matter, like a main thing that you want in your collages? Because if I look at some of your work, the subject matters seem quite important to the pieces. Is that where you start, or how does the process go?
That's it's a good question. I think I have two sort of main ways that I approach stuff. The times where I want to do more of a freestyle type of collage. You can when you look, there's some pieces that when you look at, you can just tell that this was just someone trying to find a groove. But now, the ones you're referring to, the ones with the characters, of late, I've really been trying to be intentional. I've really been trying to be more intentional with the storytelling. So, who are they? Where is this? What's happening? I'm a fan of just coming up with little stories, even if it's a paragraph or two, to describe the scene, because it's just a way of adding depth to the piece. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you could be technically good at executing the idea, but can you immerse people in your world? Can people get a glimpse of what you're thinking? Can people get a glimpse of this world that you're coming up with? So yeah, narrative more and more is becoming important to me. Yeah.
Amazing.
Nice.
And so I think it's high time, because I've been looking forward to this part of the conversation since the beginning. I was hoping that we could maybe talk a little bit about some of your work, and almost have you maybe talk through some of the thinking process or the curative style. And before we chatted, there was one piece that you shared with me that I'd like us specifically to go through, and that's the piece that, as you sort of mentioned, is called Reba, and
Yeah.
it's a very interesting one. So maybe if you don't mind, you could just tell us a little bit about, maybe a little bit about how this project came to be, and maybe some of the aesthetic or stylistic choices.
So yeah, Reba. Where do I begin? I grew up in Nairobi, and there's this sort of lingua franca that we use a lot in the city. It's called Sheng. So Sheng is this amalgamation of Swahili, English, and so many other words from very many tribes, because we have 42 tribes in Kenya. So sometimes just words from different tribes find themselves in this little language. Yeah, it's a very informal language that people speak, friends. Yeah, we rarely use in formal situations. So riba is a word from that particular, from Sheng, and it has many meanings actually. It means short stories, it means news, it just generally means chatter between people, sort of like the grapevine type of thing. So yeah, just by the choice of that word already, it was clear that I was trying to tell a story. Though in Kiswahili, according to the Swahili dictionary, riba is interest that money earns in the bank. That's just it, by the way. Yeah, so that's how I ended up calling this compilation Riba. And my intention was just to pick experiences that I had gone through in my life in the Nairobi CBD and kind of impose these experiences and stories on fictional characters. Yeah, and that's how you end up with Riba. So that's the cover right there. Vintage PC. Yeah, I had a little write-up. That actually ended up changing. I changed it to a poem, but I'll update my website. Yeah, let's go to the next one. The next. Yeah, that. So this was a time I was really obsessed with African masks. Yeah, they just baffled me. I was like, whoa, these people so many years ago, and like they come up with such vivid characters, you know. It's to date it's still very enamoring, and I often wonder like how on earth did they do this, you know. So yeah, I happened to get this from a museum's website. I think it's the Met. They have a section where there's art that you can use under the Creative Commons license.
Wow.
So anybody can just go and get.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, so they take photos of their catalog, and then depending on what it is you're interested in. So let's say I'm from the Kamba tribe in Kenya. So I often go there, look for Kamba beadwork. Because that also points to another interesting dynamic about artwork that is African and is situated in other museums. This is the only way I can access this artwork. I can't go physically to experience it. So my philosophy is that if I can use this in my artwork, well and good, you know. I haven't violated any copyrights. It's adding another layer to my work. So yeah, this is a lady called Mkanya. And the story behind this was that I was walking to class, and then this lady just stops me and asks me, "Hi, I'm looking for a taxi to this particular place." And in my mind, I'm like, "I'm late. Why are you stopping me? Just let me go to class." And then the little excerpt just ends there. So that is reflective of those mornings where I would go to class. So arrive to the CBD we call them matatus in South Africa, you call them taxis. Yeah, you get to the stage and then there's this long walk to class and then all these people you meet in this commotion. So yeah, that was just something I picked from there.
Amazing.
Yeah, let's go to the next.
Yes.
It's crazy what you mentioned about, having access to African art that's not in Africa. In a way, reappropriating it in your own work, you're bringing it back to Africa.
Yep. So this particular image, I got it off of one same museum photos and stuff. So this is the original photo is of a Ugandan warrior.
Wow.
From the Jire tribe. Yeah, if I remember correctly. So this character, I kind of reenacted this scene that once happened to me. So in 2013 in Kenya, we had terrorist attacks in one of our biggest shopping malls. And the Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility. So because of that attack, suddenly there was this stigma towards bearded men. So having a beard was actually a bit dangerous for a young Kenyan man at the time. There were cases of abductions, because now people are paranoid. The state is paranoid because of this terror attack. So this one time I was heading for an exam, actually, for an afternoon exam. Just walking through the CBD and I was stopped by these cops, just randomly, "Yo, come. So produce your ID. Let's see if you're actually a Kenyan citizen," and all that. So, yeah, long story short, I made this character to kind of just depict the cops at the time. So this project, the way I made it, it had an accompanying excerpt, but it was all in Sheng and I didn't get the time to translate it. But the text that accompanies this is just like a 4 or 5 sentence sort of exchange between myself and the cop. "Who are you?" I state my name. "Where are you going? Can I see your ID?" And then I walk away very annoyed and very pissed. Yeah, so that was that. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Yeah, this was really interesting. This was actually this was like a screenshot of a video. The piece itself is a video. So this is a traditional Meru. Meru is yet another tribe, but it's a traditional Meru witch doctor.
Okay.
Yeah, I just really liked. I really loved the vibe more than anything. I won't even try and be too deep with this one. Yeah, this felt like one of those freestyle pieces. I have this photograph. I am trying to figure out how can I make this look good, Yeah, and this is what came about.
I like that it doesn't have to be deep.
Exactly.
It's also important to say,
yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's also quite nice when you enjoy something or enjoy looking at something when you enjoy it, but you yourself aren't always quite sure why.
Yeah, exactly.
That in itself is, that question alone makes it meaningful.
Yeah. So this next piece, kind of like a similar story. So I think what I was also trying to achieve with this little collection was to do some sort of a magical realism kind of thing. Like this is a bird wearing a suit, looking dapper. I mean, that's just not normal. But yeah, I find like these are some of the realms where I thrive so much, just really, really pushing the boundaries. So I remember, Stephanie, you asking me, like, do I think about the character and the setting and all? So it's stuff like this that I try to do. So the instances where I'll illustrate a human being, and the other instances where I'll just go a bit crazy and just do this bad man wearing a suit. So the story behind this, it's also fictional. Let me just try and translate it directly from Sheng. Let me see how I'll do. So his feathers are green and pink and gray. What's his deal? I'm a bit inconvenienced that he's in my way and I'm trying to get off the bus. Today I was heading to the thrift store. The lady at the shop told me to come back on Tuesday when she gets new stuff. There's this pair of Vans that I've really, really been looking for. Let me see if today will be my lucky day. Yeah, that's just a little excerpt that accompanied this piece.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so in my mind, this guy was in my way, and I'm trying to just like alight this bus. I'm so excited to get my new pair of Vans. I've been looking forward to this the entire week. I can't just get my hands on this pair any sooner. Yeah.
I really, really, really like that. And I think especially you sort of speaking about this.
Yes.
This moment. And then also representing it visually. And, I'm sort of thinking a little bit back towards what Stephanie mentioned about like being classically trained gives you this, in some sense, Eurocentric influence, especially because a lot of the history of art is around European artists. But maybe even more than that, one of the things that's interesting, and I'm completely freestyling here, is like if the way that you learn art is through books and through, looking at existing works, you don't necessarily have to go through that process of capturing a moment. And that, I think, actually is one of the things that's interesting, because if the way if you develop your style by looking at existing artworks and then in a way reproducing them or using them to derive your own style, what you're doing is learning how to recreate artworks in some sense. But if the way that you learn how to do art is by looking at the real world and then representing it, there's a different kind of thing, because you're trying to actually capture a moment. And I think for me, that's one of the things that really stands out about your work, is that there's more than just what I'm looking at in this. Like there's an aesthetic, there's a feeling, there's an emotion. And I think especially with the last one that you actually read and translated the excerpt, it feels like it put me into your shoes in some way. And I have to say, I really appreciated that. I had, as you can tell, I had a lot of fun making this. And this was more of just like a labor of love, more than just, trying to put out artwork so that I can use it to apply for something. It was just me, my time, and deciding to be like, okay, let's see what we can do with 5 portraits. Let's see how far we can take it. Yeah.
I do like that you accompany most of your pieces, obviously, because you post them on social media. You accompany them with, like you said, either a paragraph or just 2 lines of text. It does give your pieces a bit of a different depth. And, words are also a form of art. So it's almost like, again, you mentioned you're a mixed medium artist, and it kind of takes that quite literally. Which I do enjoy, because it's like a more dimensional experience to a 2D piece.
Yeah, that's actually very accurate, guys.
Yeah.
I think you should consider recording yourself reading it and having that as the audio on your posts on social.
No, actually,
I think that could be really cool.
That's actually a great idea. Once I get over my anxiety, that would be first on my list.
Nice.
Show me an artist that got over their anxiety, and I'll show you someone lying.
I don't want to be seen. But yeah, you're right. Like, it definitely adds a lot. It really, really adds a lot. And a story never hurt no one, you know. Yeah, people are very curious. They want to know, what are you thinking? What's going on in your head? So yeah, that's definitely something I would do.
Yeah. And I know I may be hopping on a little bit, but you know, when I think about, for example, when I think about the environment of being in a CBD, like at peak traffic and all of that, like your artwork almost explains that without showing the CBD. It's almost like
It's
the nature of the
sensory overload
Exactly.
of the
That's
colors, the patterns. It's exactly that. It's like, it's so high strung.
and the chaos. Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to explain with this.
Especially the other thing also that stood out to me is the fact that you at least with the last one, that you wrote in is it active voice or first person or whatever it is, like you speak about it as if you're there and it's happening at that point in time, and it takes it that little bit further into drawing you into this sort of imaginary world. And so I guess I've got a couple of questions on the back of that. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No. Please, by all means, continue.
So the first is, do you ever consider sort of changing your style? Like, are there mediums that you're interested in exploring, and strictly from an artistic perspective? Because, you know, product design, like graphic design and all of that is a little bit more client work. And it seems to me like this sort of mixed medium sort of collage is more like your artistic side. Are there other mediums that you're interested in exploring?
Yeah, actually, I am dying to try out physical collages. Just trying to translate what I've been doing on screen into tangible stuff. Mostly because I want to challenge myself. Because, you know, with Photoshop, I have the luxury of... The biggest thing I always tell myself is, Anthony, you're so lucky you can resize things. You know, it's just Control T, make this thing bigger, make this thing smaller. But, you know, with the analog thing, you have to commit. There's just no two ways about it.
Are you scared you'll be really shit with physical collages?
Exactly. And I'll be found out. But all jokes aside, physical collages really speak to me as well. Because you actually get an opportunity to make things that you can feel. You can add literal texture. You see the way you look at some of my stuff and you can see the texture. This time I want to feel the texture. So that's something I would be keen on learning. And I'd also like to paint. I find painting a bit intimidating, I'm not gonna lie.
It's starting with nothing, which is not quite what you're used to.
Deep respect for people, because I know we keep saying that art has this very Eurocentric way of looking at things, but there's this old Italian painter, it's called Caravaggio, and his paintings, my God, the way he renders light and shadows, and you know, art from that time was really trying to depict reality as close as possible. It's like a photograph. And just thinking about how did he do that with paint? Yeah, so it's just something else. But I would love to learn. I still would love to learn, just to get over that little fear and anxiety. But yeah, I would love to see how my art would translate over different mediums. That would be really, really interesting. Yeah.
All right, and there was one more thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about. Maybe also just to give some of the creatives on over on this side a little bit of an idea. Can you tell us a little bit about like what is the, I don't know if there is a community, but like what does the creative community look like that side? Like is there an art scene? Like are there galleries that do exhibitions? Like what does it look like being an artist in Kenya?
Yeah, is there like First Thursdays events in Kenya?
Sorry, I didn't get that, Stephanie.
I was saying, is there like First Thursdays in Kenya? So it's once a month on the first Thursday. All galleries are open till late, and you basically just walk the streets drinking and gallery hopping.
Oh wow, that happens.
Yeah.
I would love that. That sounds like a really good time. We don't have that, but we do have a number of galleries here. Though they're not within the same vicinity. You'd have to take an Uber to move from one to another. So they're in different corners of the city. But there are galleries. There's one pretty renowned gallery that I had the pleasure of exhibiting. My first show was there. It was a group show. It's called Circle Art Gallery. Really, really amazing artists who have shown there and who are being represented by that gallery. Yeah, but that's the thing as well. Whoever was curating the show discovered me off Instagram. I kind of wish that access to galleries wasn't so guarded, because especially as a DIY artist, it can feel a bit, what's the word? I don't want to use the word gatekeeping.
Inaccessible.
Exactly, inaccessible is a word. Yeah, so DIY artist, bedroom artist, or whatever it is, entirely self-taught, and that's just me. I can imagine how many other artists right now who are in a similar position as I, and it would be nice to have access to those spaces, because it's those spaces that kind of give you the boost and take you to the next level. So those opportunities are a bit far and in between, unfortunately.
Kind of breaks my heart a little bit. We've come so far, yet if you think back to the European art history we're speaking of, there was a point where not all people had access to see art because it was only privileged to the bourgeoisie, and in some way we still have that. Even here in South Africa, it's a topic Alfie and I have been discussing as well, the inaccessibility of how to actually get your stuff into a gallery if you aren't trained, aren't known because of your education, or the people and the network.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because what I'm realizing is this whole NFT scene that we're seeing right now, and as much as crypto seems to have some negative connotations, this particular NFT scene is the people who are kind of, getting these opportunities are the DIY artists. It's like a fuck you to the galleries, because I don't have access to your spaces. So we're going to make our own spaces online, and we're going to price our artwork like galleries, and there's no gatekeeping online. So in as much as people do have some choice words for the NFT space, I acknowledge the effort that's gone into kind of creating this counterculture. It's not easy starting things like this. And maybe that's what's going to help more artists get their work out there without having to go through galleries and museums and all these other institutions. Because like you said, Stephanie, it's like they look for artists with a particular pedigree, have you done art? Have you studied art? Or, and such kind of things. And that leaves so many people unconsidered.
Out. Yeah.
Yeah. If
That's
you only
very
take
true.
those people that check all those boxes, it also means we only get one representation of stories and narratives, which also means that perpetuates the same narratives through the art history that we're creating in the present, which is also a scary thing to think about.
It is. It is very scary. I agree.
Yeah. So I think we're probably in the latter half of this conversation, maybe even a little bit more than half. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, firstly, are you working on any projects at the moment that you maybe want to tell us a little bit about? Something that's coming up, a show, an exhibition, just something you're excited to post? What's on the horizon?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think from next year, I'm trying to see how I can get more into sort of interactive art installations. I'm having a hard time kind of conceptualizing that, especially within Kenya. What would that look like? But I'm very keen on, taking this even a step further. But that aside, I'm working on a compilation as well, just like Reba. I still don't have a title for it, but this one is
Okay.
is more personal. Think of it like a music album.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll have 10 pieces. I'm trying to do renditions, my interpretations of things I saw in my childhood. I'm trying to get a bit more sappy and, talking about love. I love love. Yeah, so right now I'm really listening to lovers rock, this subgenre of reggae from the night. It's still there. I really love lovers rock, and it's super inspiring my work right now. Yeah, I'm also gonna have some AI assisted stuff in there. So yeah, it's doing compilations like this allows me to try different technologies, different ideas, different concepts. Yeah, so I'm actually trying to see if I can make this more of an annual thing. I would love
Nice.
that. Best case scenario, every year I have a compilation complete with a publication as well, like a physical copy that, some of my fans can buy.
I love that you have that goal. I would say definitely go for it. We'll
Thank
be
you.
keeping an eye on you, keeping you accountable to do
Yes, I
it.
need accountability partners. Yeah, so that's what I'm currently excited about. Hopefully, the compilation will be out before the end of the year. Yeah. Oh, and yeah, next year I'd also like to do a children's book. That I am very, very interested in.
Oh,
Oh,
that's very
doing.
cool.
Yeah, I would love to
that
do
is going to be interesting.
I would love to do a children's book. So I'm already thinking about what that would look like.
Nice.
What kind of story I'd tell, because writing for children is so very different.
Different.
Yeah. So right now I'm kind of just reading up on that, looking at past children book authors and stuff that I like. Yeah, and crafting the narrative. So that's something else we should be on the lookout for.
Really
Nice.
cool. Well, definitely hit us up when you have that,
Oh,
so
yeah,
we
for
can
sure.
have a look and see what it looks like,
Yeah.
and also share it, of course. But yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think especially because we've been talking a lot about narrative, and as three people also living in the African continent, we've spoken about a lot of stuff that relates to all three of us, and I think our listeners are going to feel the same, and also a lot of relevant day topics that that need to be talked about, and some celebrated and some held accountable for. But we do one thing at the end of the show. So we ask the previous guest to leave a question for the current guest. So The previous guest we spoke to is actually the episode we published this past Monday, which is Ilan Smith. He is a illusionist and mentalist magician here in South Africa.
Wow.
And his question is around the saying, the saying that says, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And he wants to know, how does that ring true for you?
I was not ready for that. If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Yeah, that's what he said, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't fully agree with that sentiment.
Okay.
Because there is a lot of work beyond just sitting down and actually doing what it is you're doing. Because before you actually...
The admin.
Not even the admin, like before you even sit down to craft whatever it is you're crafting, you've definitely had little meetings with yourself. Okay, so we're going to do this. No, that's a shit idea. Start again. Or, oh, yeah. You commit to something for so long and then you're like, this just is not working. And then you start all over again. That's work. I think that's I would call it emotional work or mental work, for lack of a better word. But I do get the sentiment behind the statement. The idea of just immersing yourself in something that you love. And, if we are to think about it like that, I would say there is some element of truth to it. But I would also like to add that a lot goes behind the scenes that is not seen, when you're actually sitting down to do the work. Because you could be taking a shower, you're already thinking about, oh shit, so maybe I should use this color. But no, that's not a good color. Oh yeah, there's this picture I saw that I could use as a reference. That kind of back and forth. So it almost feels like you're always doing something before you produce your next work.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that. And I think in some ways you are very right. The other thing that also I think of, just sort of off of the back of what you've mentioned, is like the likelihood that you love every single part of the process is not very high. It's typically like there's a specific part of it that you really like, and then there's a whole bunch of things that you have to do because people need money.
Exactly. And then what Stephanie was saying, the admin work. Because what they don't tell you about
replying to emails,
what they don't tell you
making
about
those reels.
A freelancer is that you're your own salesman, you're your own business development team, you're your own finance team. You're everything. I don't know if you guys have seen the Spider-Man meme of them pointing at each other. That's you. That's you and your other you and your other you.
Yeah. That's very true.
So is this where I come up with a question? Or do I send mine in as an email?
Yeah, you can send it in. Just also to give you a bit of time to think about it.
Yeah, thank you.
So one of actually maybe before I end off, there was one thing that you mentioned that I just want to touch on, that I hadn't thought about it till you mentioned it. And you mentioned AI generated art. And I just wanted to get your what's the hot take? How are you feeling about it? With Midjourney and DALL-E and all of these AI artists sort of entering the landscape. What's your thoughts about it?
It's such a touchy topic these days, as with everything. But we on some level we are right to be scared, because when you think about it, it's so easy to generate these images, and artists are also rightfully scared because it takes so much time for an artist to sit down to create a piece, But then here is an agency that can pay what was the last time they're selling the credits, like DALL-E is selling credits at 0.25 a dollar per prompt. So a prompt is what you put in, and then the output you usually get 4 images. Now think about it. If you're commissioning an artist, if you're to get 4 images, you'd have to spend a lot more money. There'd be a lot more time required for the artist to sit down and conceptualize all these things. So to get all that amount of work done for 0.15 of a dollar, and what's even more questionable is the data set that goes into training these models. It becomes a very dicey, very, very dicey topic to talk about, because so many artists, how they build these models is that they just go onto the internet and then they just send bots and just collect and collect and collect and collect. Exactly. So there's the issue of consent. Artists haven't consented to it. Just so many ethical issues, actually. Those are the more pressing concerns about AI art. However, I used DALL-E for a while, and I was using it in a very interesting way. So I would make a piece, and then I would give that to DALL-E, and then I would tell DALL-E,
cool,
generate some, variations for me. Let me see what you'll come up with. I find that very conversational. It's like, okay, so this is what I'm bringing. Let me see what you can give me. And then, you see new things that you hadn't considered, like maybe someone in a different pose, or DALL-E kind of absorbing your color schemes and giving you whatever it will
That's
give
so
you.
cool.
Yeah, so that's a use case I'm really interested in, and I've been experimenting with it a lot. So I start a piece. Then when I feel stuck, I just throw that into DALL-E, and then I kind of look at so maybe I can add someone in the back doing something. It's give and take. This is what I've done. Let me see what you can give me. Let me see what I can incorporate from that, etc, etc. So use cases like those I'm very keen on. And even in product design, you can do like a simple mock-up and then just throw that into DALL-E, see the kind of variations DALL-E will give you, and you'll be like, so I can kind of place my icons like this. Maybe there's another color scheme I can use. It helps break the creative block. That's one aspect of AI art that I kind of enjoy and I appreciate. So I try to avoid generating things from scratch entirely using AI. I want to have a hand in the process. Apart from just the prompt, I want to give DALL-E my work. Let me see what what sense you can make out of this. So there's an Instagram post I put up recently where I was doing that. So I fed DALL-E, I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the 5th of my posts. So if you go through that, and then you can see the kind of variations that DALL-E gives me.
I see.
And my piece is the last one.
Wow,
so
that's so interesting.
That kind of collaborative process excites me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love this.
That's very cool.
This is such an interesting use case. I haven't actually, I'm not in that space at all, but I haven't thought about this use case for it. But
it's quite exciting. I was so excited when I saw these photos. I was like, wow. That's my stance on AI art.
Amazing. And I think it's also good to hear that, because us as the layman or the outsider looking in, we can throw our toys out the cot as much as we want about AI art, but I think it's really about the people who are in the space that really need to be speaking about it and sort of giving us an idea of what does this mean, how as a society do we need to be adapting to this, and also because it brings up a lot of questions, which could be a whole other podcast.
Exactly.
But Anthony, thank you very much for for making the time. Maybe before we wrap things up, can you just let us know where can people find you? What are the handles and the links?
Okay. So yeah, I am on Instagram. My handle is Nafsiyake, NAFSI dot YAKE. I hope you'll put this in the show notes.
We will.
Yeah. And as well, my website is nafsiyake.cargo.site. You can find me there. Yeah, I'm getting a domain name pretty soon, but that's the placeholder for now. Yeah, so reach out to me. Fashion illustrations, I'm getting into that. Fashion design, that's what I'm doing as well. I run a streetwear brand on the side. It's called Penny Billy. I'm actually in the process of preparing for a drop in the next few weeks. Yeah, so you should be seeing something to that effect pretty soon. And yeah, collage design, editorial design, storybooks. I'm like I'm like a sponge right now. So yeah, let's just collaborate.
Love it.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right then. I think that's it. Anthony, thank you so much for making the time and being willing to share your work and to share your story as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing.
This was so much fun.
Very insightful.
Yeah.
Such a fun podcast. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing. This is something that's really, really important and that we need, and especially this cross-country type of thing, South Africa, Kenya, and all these other countries that you guys are working with. We need more of that, and I think this is a great step in that direction.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so,
and to everybody listening,
thank you.
It's a pleasure. And for those listening, thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are listening on audio, I hope you actually pulled up the website or Anthony's Instagram to sort of follow along as he explained it, because I think you're really missing out if you're not actually looking at it as he's explaining the work. But otherwise, thank you very much and have a good day further.